Now, on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
6:07 here on this 11th day of September 11th. Thanks for joining us here on O'Connor and Company. From your nation's capital, live and all around the planet. We, of course, acknowledge the 24th anniversary of that fateful day where our lives were changed forever in 2001 with the terrorist attacks of September 11th. And I'll be honest with you, we had a full planned program emphasizing the 24th anniversary of September 11th. But, of course, the events of yesterday afternoon in Utah have crept into the conversation with the political assassination of Charlie Kirk. We'll continue with our memories and our own reflections, as well as audio from all day yesterday and all evening. We're also going to be joined by good friends. When I say we, by the way, I'm talking about Bethany Mandel, who is with me all morning. And thank you, Bethany, for helping me keep it together as we talk about the loss of our friend.
I don't think there is any keeping it together, but we're certainly on air. So here we are.
Here we are, and we're all in this together. Well, you got to, it's an old. We're sitting shiva. If I can, if I could borrow your Jewish customs, if we could, you family gets together and you just sit and you pray and you commiserate and you remember and you honor, and that's what we're doing. Yeah. On sitting shiva on the radio. Boy, there's a theme for a new program.
It's really entertaining. I was telling you during the break that who's gonna organize the funeral without Charlie?
Yeah.
Know.
Again, like we said, Andrew, in the same way Andrew Breitbart inspired and mobilized thousands, if not millions, there are plenty who are ready to step up. And to that end, let's. Real fast. 6:35. We'll talk to Greg Price about Kirk's passing. At 7:05, Governor Scott Walker of Young America's Foundation, a colleague of Charlie's and Turning Point USA. 8:05, KT McFarland, and 8:35, Susan Crabtree covering the Secret Service. Let's bring in Kirk Schlichter. Kirk Schlichter, of course, senior columnist at Townhall, retired colonel from the United States Army, author of multiple books. And, Kurt, you and I spoke quite a bit yesterday, not on the air, and I know, like me, you were engaged with a lot of different interactions with people in our world who knew Charlie, either knew him well. But one thing I've noticed here, Kurt, is even those of us who knew him but didn't, we wouldn't call him a great friend, but he knew everyone. We all had personal contacts with him. That was part of what was so engaging about him and the way he went about what he did.
No, that's certainly true, Larry. I mean, he was a singular guy. For us conservative, patriots, for lack of a better word, in the 80s it was Reagan, in the 90s it was Rush, in the 2000s it was Andrew. In the 10s, it was probably Donald Trump, and now, especially for young people, is Charlie Kirk. I mean, I just can't think of a person who was comparable, both in his effect and the number of people that he activated. I mean, you look at the people who Andrew activated, you, me, Bethany, dozens of other people, and that's what Charlie did in the last few years.
Yeah.
This is
and so
loss.
Well, by the way, it can't be overlooked
yeah.
that the reason that he was hated so much was not because of his style or his because he was quite frankly mild and moderate in his delivery of his ideas. The reason why he was a threat was that he was effective. Mm-hmm. He made it happen.
Yep.
Oh yeah, he was good at. He was smart. He was quick. He was largely self-educated. That was another thing.
Yes.
He rejected the ruling class's garbage credentialism. I mean, he's a guy who dropped out of college and he's just running circles around these half-wit gender studies clowns, and it's he was a repudiation of their deepest beliefs, from his faith to his ability to learn on his own and to reject the garbage ruling class ideology. At the end of the day, this is a guy who was shot to death because he was saying words they didn't like. Yeah. And many of them are cheering.
Yep. Yeah, and I think that we can't ignore that fact. But one thing that I think that he shared in common with with the late Andrew Breitbart was also the fact that he was a happy warrior.
Yeah.
He was such a joyful person, and that joy really came through in everything he did. He believed, there's so many people who work in this industry who are bad people, and you hear the stories.
Miserable people.
And miserable people, but also people who don't live their values, who are not good to their spouses, who are not good parents. And he was the exception to that. And I never heard a whisper about him stepping out or any. He was a deeply, deeply happy man doing what he believed, and he deeply believed it. There's not many like him that can hold a candle.
Yeah.
Well, he's irreplaceable, but we're going to replace him with hundreds, if not thousands, of young people.
You sound like Larry.
We're going to do it anyway.
Millions.
Yeah. I mean, yesterday was a radicalizing event. And but the echoes are it's going on. This is not going to stop. We're not going to double down, as I wrote in my Townhall column. We're going to triple down.
Oh, yeah.
I have yet to meet anyone who's afraid. They shot him to death in front of us, horribly. I was hoping it was AI.
Yeah.
And
in fact,
afraid,
Kurt and I were talking on the phone when some of the early videos came out. Kurt and I said, "Kurt, have you seen this?" And he goes, "That can't be real. That's AI. That's just because it was when we were still praying for Charlie, and we heard that we had some reports that he was stabilized and that they were administering emergency surgery, and that it wasn't AI." Kurt, it was real, and that's the thing about political assassinations like this. They're public and they're gruesome and they're horrible for a reason, because it's meant to terrify those of us who could have been sitting in that chair.
It's not working. I have not met anyone who said, "Well, I'm scared. I'm going to back down." I met a lot of people who said, "Oh, great, I'm just going to get out another gun," because it ain't happening. Oh, and let me tell you, this stuff about common sense gun control. No, we're not doing that. Because we know
were people really trying that one yesterday? I didn't.
Oh yeah, AOC came out with that, and Big Chief Warren, whose people ought to be able to testify about what happens when you don't have guns. This is going to be a new conservative movement. We're still going to be happy warriors, but we're focused.
Yeah,
and we're not playing. They murdered the moderate.
Yep.
Okay, they chose between If you want to go the easy way, you go Charlie's way, because he'll talk to you and he'll work with you and he'll be nice.
That's right.
Yep.
There's another way too, but the objective at the end state where we're not serfs, that is not in dispute. That is not up for debate. That doesn't ever happen. So
we are emboldened.
You ought to go.
If they thought this was a way of silencing us, they've got another thing coming. It's quite the opposite. In fact, it's going to get a whole lot louder around here. Kurt, thank you, my friend. I was happy to have you to talk to yesterday a couple of times, and I'm certainly happy this morning as well.
Thanks, Kurt.
Love you.
Well, I wish it was under better circumstances, but forward. Let's move forward.
Amen.
Yeah, I just said I love you in front of our audience. Are you just going to let that stand?
I was pretty surprised by that one.
It's hot, sure.
Like a brother, mostly. It's 6:50. Charlie would want us to laugh. 6:15.
WMAL, making sense of the news. Live from the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios. Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
I know that it's somewhat object of mockery to say thoughts and prayers, but thoughts and prayers for his family. They need it from all of us. And Jesse's right. If they could do this, they are capable of anything. I think that was the message. I believe that was the message. It's really hard to radicalize Republicans.
Yeah.
It's like we're not the radical type. But if you thought that you were going to shut a movement down, you're going to get a rude awakening. You woke us up.
Greg Gutfeld and the hosts of The Five had the unfortunate duty to report on this live in real time as the news came down that Charlie Kirk had in fact passed away. For about 2.5 hours, we were hopeful. I did a live stream yesterday with my subscribers on YouTube and Rumble just for the sole purpose of being together and praying.
That's really
and
nice.
Talking about Charlie and hoping that we prayed together. It was like a big 1 hour long prayer circle as we hoped that the Lord would somehow see Charlie through this. But of course, his will be done. I can't imagine how the gang there on the 5 kept it together. And you heard Greg drop a very uncharacteristic F-bomb. And I assure you it was not beeped in real time on live cable.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the things that I can't stop thinking about is that this was at Utah Valley University.
Yeah, Orem, Utah.
Never heard of this school. When I first saw the reports, I thought it was UVA because that's a school I've heard of.
Yeah.
He opened this tour that he was doing at a school that no one heard of. He wasn't a provocateur like the New York Times called him. He wasn't at Columbia or Harvard. He went to real America and talked to real students and got them out there.
That is such a great point. And let me also say, Charlie was, by the standards of the world that we live in terms of media, content creation, and political activism, he was astronomically successful, Bethany. He did not have to work another day the rest of his life.
Yeah.
He certainly did not have to do another college tour, and he certainly didn't have to do it at places like Orem, Utah.
Yeah.
He did this because this is what he loved to do.
Yep. And one of the other things I love, I'm sorry, I was looking through our DMs on Twitter yesterday.
Yeah.
It feels like the other day, but it was only yesterday. I was looking through our DMs last night, and I had seen something that he said that went viral about a year or two ago, and I wanted to write about it for Deseret, which is like this weird, horrible, poetic thing because Deseret actually reported on it live better than almost anyone because they're Utah-based.
They're right there.
And so I was writing a column about something he said and asked him for clarification, like when was this from? And he was giving me, here's the date, here's more context. He didn't have to do that for a column for Deseret News.
Yeah.
And when I first messaged him, I was like, there's no way Charlie Kirk is going to respond to this. And he did. He did. Yeah. And he said, it's a pleasure. Thank you so much for getting more attention on it. That's what he said. And that's who he was.
That's how he was. I did the same thing. We were all looking through our old texts and our DMs, and I asked him to come on the show recently, and he said he couldn't because of schedule, and he was on the West Coast, but he also went out of his way to thank me so much for inviting him on.
Yes. A man who texts the president and the vice president regularly.
Right. Here's a little from Jesse Waters. Jesse, also on Fox News yesterday, who knew him very well, cut 3.
My daughter loved him. I mean, she's 13 years old. This is a man who touched an entire generation of Americans and electrified them and made them patriots. And this is not a controversial person. This is not a polarizing guy, a divisive person, a firebrand that he's being described as in the media. This is like a guy that you have a barbecue with at your summer house. This is the kind of guy, if you came back with your daughter, you'd say, thank God, we got a good one. He's a great athlete. He's a great person. He's a great Christian. You see his family out there. He had his kids not facing the photos because he wanted to protect them, because he knew how evil people were. So when he goes out to these college campuses, he's not provoking anybody. He's like Socrates. He asks questions, and he does it with a smile.
Yeah, he does. In fact, there are videos out there, and I implore you to go to social media or YouTube or wherever and find some of these videos where people, liberals, left-wingers who hated him would take that open mic and say some of the most horrific things you could possibly say to a person. And he would just let it wash off his back, and he would keep the smile on his face, and he would engage. And he knew, by the way, partly that by letting them show their hate toward him, he was winning. Mm-hmm. By letting them expose their vile contempt for Charlie and for people who agreed with Charlie. But also, I truly do believe that he thought that he could maybe just persuade one person. Maybe that not that person sitting across from him throwing all that at him, but he knew that it wasn't about the one-on-one engagement with that person. It was about all of us watching and all of us listening.
Yep.
And when you saw him with dignity and with respect engage with somebody who was so vile, that's how it's the old phrase, hearts and minds. That's how you do change hearts and minds. And that's how you attract people. And we can all learn from that.
Amen.
It's 6:23.
Making sense of your world.
I can't believe this.
News Talk 105.9 WMAL.
And I am so with you.
Making sense of the news.
Coming up, I'm going to introduce you to a young man named Greg Price. I really wanted him to come on the air today because he is the perfect example of the kind of young man that Charlie Kirk inspired and brought into the world of conservative media. And he has already made an impact at the age of 28. Keep it here as we honor the life and legacy of Charlie Kirk. It's 6:30.
WMAL-FM, Woodbridge, Washington. A Cumulus media station. Making sense of the news. News Talk 105.9. News now. Now on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
It's 6:37 now, and I really appreciate all of you being with us this morning. This is sort of it's a unique way to go through grief and reflect on the life of a person who touched so many. Whether you knew him or not, Charlie Kirk had an impact. And his death is just the beginning of what Charlie Kirk will end up accomplishing on this planet. And we have much more to discuss this morning. Bethany Mandel is with us, and thank you, Bethany, for helping me keep it together.
It's an honor, Larry.
7:05, we'll talk to Governor Scott Walker of Young America's Foundation, whose efforts work in parallel with Turning Point USA and our campuses. 8:05, KT McFarland to reflect on today's anniversary of the 9/11 terrorist attacks, another turning point in our nation. And at 8:35, Susan Crabtree of Real Clear Politics. I want to bring in Greg Price. Now, you might not know Greg Price's name, but you know his work, I assure you. And he perfectly, I think, exemplifies the movement, and it is a movement, of young people Charlie Kirk inspired and activated. And he was one of the first people I thought of when I heard this news yesterday. Greg, good morning, my friend. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you for having me, Larry and Bethany.
Real fast, Greg Price is a kind of a social media phenomenon and has worked for campaigns for political organization. You worked for the Trump campaign in 24 and worked for the White House for a stint here earlier this year as well. And you had an impact. I earlier said that I think you single-handedly, along with the president, won the social media war against the Democrats in 2024 because of your instincts and your talents. But this all started with Charlie Kirk, didn't it?
Yeah, I mean, when I was in college, I graduated 2019, and Turning Point was a big thing at the time, but not even it's a phenomenon force to be reckoned with now. But I went to my first Turning Point event. Before I was doing anything I was doing today, I was going to Turning Point in 2017 when I was 19, and it was going to the events like those that, got me into doing TPUSA on my campus and college Republicans. And, I became a chapter chair, and it's, something that got my foot in the door and made friends with people I'm still friends with today. And it, you make connections that end up with you being able to work in conservative politics. And, I certainly wouldn't be here doing what I'm doing today without it. And I'm sure I'm not the only person that has a story like that. And just to, give people an idea of the type of person Charlie was, I'd met him in passing a couple times when I was in college, introduced myself and had brief conversations. And then, many years later when he had me on his show for the first time, by then he had knew who I was and what I was doing. And, I'd asked him, I was like, oh, before we went on, I was like, do you remember? I don't know if you remember me, but I was in TPUSA in college, and we had met a couple times, and I wasn't expecting him to remember who I was, but he knew exactly who I was and where I'd gone to school. And, over the years, anytime I'd I'd gotten a new job or had been doing something, he would always send me a message and be like, oh, you're doing a good job on this, and congratulations and whatever. And, he didn't have to do that. I'm sure I'm not the only person that's ever interacted with him that could say the same thing, but that's just
yeah. I think a lot of people could. We were having an interesting conversation off air just a few minutes ago with our executive producer, Heather Hunter, and kind of debating. And I want to hear your perspective as someone who focuses so much on video and digital media and using it as a tool of persuasion. Sort of debating the idea of, should these videos, these last moments of Charlie's life, should they be in the public space? And I'm curious what you think. I personally haven't watched them. I can't watch them, and I won't watch them, but I'm not sure if they should be out there or not. I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate, I think, especially considering, the guy now has a wife and he has 2 kids that just lost their father, and now they're going to have to, grow up, and whenever they Google their father's name, it's always going to come back to this. And so I think it's just the reality of the age we live in on social media, where things like that, horrible, terrible things like that, travel so quickly.
Yeah.
It's just, I don't know if there's a way. There's not really a way we can rid ourselves of those things. Unfortunately, it's just horrible, incredibly sad.
Greg, talk to me about you're 28 years old, and much was said after the 24 election about President Trump and J.D. Vance appealing to this mostly male, but a lot of young women in the movement as well, but predominantly male, young, 20-something conservatives who are not only focused on the political aspects of this, but also the cultural aspects of the MAGA movement. And, Charlie spent just as much time talking about faith and marriage and fatherhood as he did about taxes and foreign policy. Tell me about your friends. Tell me about the movement that you can point right back to Charlie being sort of the leader of, and where it goes from here.
Yeah, I mean, anybody who's around my age will tell you about the impact that Charlie Kirk had. And I think anybody who's a college student right now will say the same thing. And you're exactly right. Like his message to you wasn't, where, you should be a Republican because we want to lower your tax. You'll have lower taxes and whatever. It was, you will live a more fulfilling life in faith and by starting a family. And that's a message that appeals to a lot of people, clearly. And I think, where we go from here, he's somebody who, if I had to describe him in one way, he's somebody who wanted you to speak loudly and boldly and unapologetically and about the things that you believed. And that's what we need to continue to do. And I know that's exactly what everybody like me and so many others that he inspired to get involved in this are going to continue doing too.
All right, Greg, listen, I appreciate you getting up for us this morning and sharing your story. And I know how hard it is, by the way. But keep doing what you're doing. That's the best. As someone who went through this about 15 years ago with Andrew Breitbart, my friend and my mentor, and someone who brought me into this, that's what Andrew wanted all of us to do. And it goes without saying that's totally what Charlie wants you to do. So, you fill that space, man. You can fill it better than anyone.
Thank you. Have a good day.
It is 6:44.
Later this morning on the Chris Plank Show, who tipped off code PINK so they could ambush Trump at dinner?
Trump is the Hitler of our time!
9 a.m. on WMAL.
Jay Leno yesterday on talk radio in Los Angeles, Tim Conway Jr.'s show, reflected on the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Yes, Jay Leno knew Charlie Kirk. Prime ministers around the world reflected on this yesterday. Every living president reflected on this yesterday and put out a statement. At Yankee Stadium, Bethany, they had a moment of silence with Charlie Kirk's image up on the scoreboard. The wide-reaching impact of Charlie Kirk on politics and pop culture worldwide can't be overstated. Jay Leno, reflecting on this, said that this was the death of free speech. I think that's overstating it.
Nope.
In fact, it quite possibly should be the opposite of that. Speech should be even freer now. Otherwise, the totalitarians and the violent authoritarians win, right?
Yeah, I was reflecting on this, during a previous segment. People who I went to high school and college with, who I didn't know their politics, are now speaking out about this. And what's that saying? The news of my death has been premature. Is that
yes,
adage?
Yes,
and that's what free speech is saying today. And we can't extrapolate, obviously, what we think Charlie would have wanted, but it's certainly not people cowering in silence. That I can say with certainty. He did not want people to be silent.
That is correct.
He wanted people to proclaim their beliefs in the rights of babies to live and our country to prosper and love of Jesus. And I say that as someone who's Jewish. That is the best way to honor Charlie, is to proclaim your love of Lord and country and family. That is the way.
That said, many of us who do what we do, certainly between our grief and our anger, we also have all had a bit of a pause to sort of regroup and reflect on how we go about doing what we do. And to that end, coming up, we're going to talk to Governor Scott Walker, who, with Young America's Foundation, go to college campuses in much the same way Charlie Kirk does. And here's a little bit from Scott Jennings yesterday, also reflecting. He made a statement here at the end, you'll hear, that I think makes all of us just take a moment and breathe deep.
And I'll be honest with you, I am in utter disbelief at this. I sat in this room last summer, the night they shot the president, and now they shot Charlie. And I'm not sure it's safe to be an outspoken conservative walking around in America right now.
It's 6:52.